I'm here at the Tarragon Theatre with Hannah Moscovitch, playwright of The Children's Republic, now playing. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you for doing this podcast.
You're very welcome. Tell me about Janusz Korczak.
He was a Polish pedagogue, a pediatrician and children's author who ran an orphanage between 1912 and 1942 in Poland, in Warsaw.
There are several interesting facets to Janusz. He undertook his work, as you said, in Poland during the Second World War, which posed, I suppose, a number of challenges to his work and his personal life, and to his progress towards his aim of raising these children. I would say his unconventional pedagogy, his martyr-like dedication to his wards, and his own personal history with war are probably three of the more interesting aspects that you touch on in the play. What was it about those elements that drew you to him as a narrative figure? What was it about him that you first realized this guy could be an interesting dramatic figure in my own work?
Well, I was interested in the extremes of his life, the extreme journey, because he was a man who believed above all that we should respect children, respect their abilities, empower children. And I was interested in the collision of that ideology with one of the most extreme periods and circumstances in human history, the Warsaw Ghetto, where no one was respected, and it was a zone of almost total demoralization for everyone, the perpetrators and the victims. And so I was interested in that, in the collision of his ideologies and his pedagogy with the Warsaw Ghetto.
It's an interesting kind of double layer, because these children are already kind of at the margins of society. They're parentless. they live 50 to a single room. And on top of that, they're then kind of within this imposed rigid structure. They're actually given quite a bit of freedom. Tell me a bit about his pedagogical approach to raising his orphan wards.
Yeah, well, what you say is interesting. I mean, we laughed a lot about that in the rehearsal process. The first act is traumatized orphans, and then the second act is traumatized orphans in the Holocaust. It can't, yeah. So we were like, wow, we're going for that darkness. He did believe, this isn't within the play, but sort of interesting about him. He really believed, for instance, that children should choose their own religion. So he refused what a lot of orphanages were doing at the time, which was imposing religion, whatever the religion was, and so there was a sort of sister orphanage that he worked with quite a lot that was run by a woman named Marina Falka, and she was a strict atheist, and she refused to allow the children any religion. And while Korczak was probably more spiritual than religious, he allowed the children religion if that helped them. And so it's ever so slightly reflected in the play. One scene where one of the characters, Misha, is reading the Torah. But he really was extreme in his belief in allowing children to make their own decisions and respecting children and their own decisions, and that is reflected. The extremity of his respect is reflected in the first act, in the degree to which he takes seriously an offense against the property of one of the children.
There's an interesting scene where he allows two boys to fight, which seems almost counterintuitive to what you'd expect a patriarchal figure to do, especially one as caring as him. Why do you think? I don't know if that was based on real research or if that was kind of a creative choice of yours to have a scene where he essentially acknowledges the desire for children to occasionally resolve conflict through physical means. Was that something that he actually allowed them to do, or was that something that you thought was a dramatic scene that might illustrate his philosophy?
No, that's real. Yes, he allowed children, his wards, to sign up to fight each other. I think his interest was in just creating a system that would empower them to make their own choices, but that to make those choices within a sort of safe framework. Same with his children's court. You know, he wanted to allow children to be empowered, but he wanted to set up systems. So his interest always seems to me to be bringing children into systems of love and community and justice. That seems to be his interest. You know, and there are some, you know, quotes of his that I've had on my printer for the time that I've been writing about him, about how, you know, his deep belief that if you show a child who's lived a life of cruelty even one gesture of kindness, it will change the course of their life.
In fact, that's almost how the play begins. Yeah. It strikes me that there's a common theme to some of your works, including this one, and that is of the child in a state of flux. I don't want to say coming of age, because it's not always necessarily that you know, even to define, but they're often you know, either in a state of rebellion or a state of self-change or a state of increased awareness. What is it about the idea that you find worthwhile returning to?
Sometimes it's hard to speak to your own preoccupations as a writer, because you're obviously, I mean, I think you write too, right? So you're taking things from your subconscious a little bit, if, you know, you're trying to. And yeah, I come back over and over. I wrote one play that was specifically theatre for young audiences, for youth theatre in Montreal, an experience I really enjoyed. There was a certain redundancy to me writing plays that are TYA, because all my plays have young people in them, all of them. So there's really no need for me to go after that. Yeah, and I think I am really interested in that period in time, partly because it is so extreme. The stakes are so high of being young, and I think maybe there's something in myself, something in me that is something true about me that I want to continue to pursue, looking at young people. I was laughing on the phone with Richard Azunin about it, because I was thinking, oh God, I always write about young people. Have you noticed that? And he was like, I hadn't noticed that, but it's okay. There are other people who will write about the old people. You can stick with the young people. And I've been like, okay, because I really am, like, and I keep making them younger, and now I'm putting young actual people in my play, and the commission that I just took with Stratford, like, I wrote them a sort of paragraph about what I was interested to do, and they were, and that got approved, but they actually wrote me back and said, we just want you to know, like, if you're going to write 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds, we do have to cast within the company, so you can't actually cast actual young people to play the roles. And I was like, that's fine, but it's like, people are at a point. You have
Brendan Gall, who's, you know, at least early 30s.
Yeah, he was like 29.
And playing probably like, what, a 16-year-old or something like that in East Berlin.
So I wish I could say something more intelligent and speak to it in a way that would really, like, you know, be enlightening.
No, if it comes from the subconscious, then it's probably best you don't think about it too hard.
I think I'm always drawn, like, I'm just always drawn to writing about young people and their experiences. And I can say now, too, because I have, you know, something like, I'm in the middle of writing so many plays. And not all of them are exclusive. It's not a total complete preoccupation, like those people who can only write about wolves or something.
We're not talking about Jack London, are we?
I love those people, though, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I love that kind of drive. But no, not all my plays are, but there are still a lot of young people in my plays to come, so.
Good to know. You're often heralded with, or as, say, Canada's great next playwright, in quotes, or the hottest writer on the scene. Often terms like that are thrown around when you're mentioned. Do you find that that kind of attention ever phases you? Do you find that your creative process has changed in any way since you've kind of, you know, risen to the top of the Canadian playwriting scene? Does the scrutiny ever bother you?
Well, I think that the reason for that really is that there is an absence of young playwrights. Not that I'm particularly special.
Oh, okay.
To be honest, you know? Because so many of our young playwrights, they write one play and then they go and write for television. So I think, you know, I'm just filling a void.
Do you feel as though there needs to be more support for young playwrights? Is it I mean, you specifically mentioned, you know, them having some modicum of success and then immediately moving to television, where granted there's, you know, quite a bit more money. Do you feel that's part of it? Is it the economics, or is it the so-called stature of Canadian playwriting?
Well, in a way, I mean, artistic directors are the ones who should be asking themselves that question. You know, I mean, I can try and speak to it. I think that television and other mediums are incredibly aggressive about headhunting. And I don't think theater is aggressive about it in the same way sometimes isn't. And theater is often not fantastic at holding its writers once it's got them, and and that's too bad because all of those writers, and I think also, I mean, and this isn't the fault of theater, television is getting better, so people can go and write in television and be creatively fulfilled and make 20 times the amount of money, and 20 times is a lot.
Yeah.
So, you can go make $250,000 writing for television, and so I think that's really hard to compete with for theater. I mean, I would say that one of the things about theater that holds me is when I feel like the artistic directors that I'm working with respect me and respect my work, and are treating me well. That holds me. That's personal though, And if I feel like I feel good about myself in the theater, then I will, and I will turn down television in order to continue to work.
And that personal touch is not always apparent with television, because people will, the first billing on any given show is usually the creator, whereas with a piece of theater, it's often the playwright. You will see a Steven Spielberg production, but you will see a David Mamet play.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think, interestingly enough, for some writers, it's a draw to not be top billed. It just depends what kind of writer you are. It's so funny, we were talking about how the young actors in my play love being in the spotlight, and I think that's awesome, and it's not necessarily what I want for myself. There are nice things about it, and there are hard things about it, which is, I think, one of the questions that you actually just asked me.
Yeah.
There are nice things about it, and then there are hard things about it, like feeling intimidated.
Yeah.
So
it partly leads into my next question. You've worked as a writer for several different media, including perhaps most prominently, or at least maybe not most prominently, but a lot of Canadians would be familiar with your work through Afghanida and other radio work. Do you have a preferred medium? Is the stage where your heart lies, or is it elsewhere, or do you have kind of love for all your children, and if so, why?
Well, I think, Afghanida started as a way for me to, like what we were talking about, relinquish some of that control, because there's a head writer, and sometimes it's so satisfying just to have somebody else guide the vision of a project, so that you're not alone in control of the vision and control of the meanings. So that was really pleasurable for me, because Greg Nelson, who was the head writer and one of the co-creators, his vision for the show is so clear, and I loved working with him and getting clear notes from him. It's like he's got pitch perfect hearing for that show, and so working with him was totally thrill a minute. But then this year I took on to head write it. So then I was in that. So I in fact started on Afghanida being really excited about what the show was and wanting to go to the vision of that show and go to Greg Nelson's vision, and then this year I took it over. So I changed my role completely on that show. But I think your question was, I think, I grew up in the theater, and so it's the theater has its claws deep in me right now, and it's big in terms of how I see myself as a writer, but I don't preclude the possibility that might change.
Yeah, I guess that first love always has a special place in your heart, regardless of what comes next.
Totally. If you think about yourself as a young person and how hard you cried over those first loves,
Yeah.
And theater's like that for me.
To go not too deep into your reservoir of upcoming projects, because I know you've always got a million things on the go. What can either Toronto audiences or even national audiences expect from you in the immediate future?
Oh, well, I have one coming up I'm excited about, and it's going to be workshop for 3 weeks here at Tarragon in January.
Very good.
And we're just getting the
cast. What's it called?
Well, that's under, it's
okay.
it's bracketed right now. what it's called is bracketed.
Okay. But we should keep our eyes open for this on the Tarragon website if we want to.
Yeah, and there'll be a bunch of public readings of it, which I would love people to come to. I'd be thrilled if you would come.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Do you have your own website?
I don't.
You don't?
Do you know
Okay.
I don't? It's really stupid.
All right. Well,
I should do
then make
that.
Google your friends. And to go completely off color here, I asked this same question to Brendan Gall a while back, and I'm curious to see what your answer will be. If you, Brendan, Michael Healy, and let's say George F. Walker were all thrown into a battle to the death cage match, who would come out alive?
What did Brendan say?
I shouldn't tell you.
I don't know. That's hard. I've never met George F. Walker, so I don't know. So just from their writing,
Sure.
well, I don't know. Definitely wouldn't be me. I'd say George F. Walker. I think.
All right.
I think he'd be my best guess.
Yeah, he seems like it. There's enough violence in his plays that he's probably got.
I think if you put us in a cage match, Michael Healy would strip naked, Brendan would lie down, I'd climb the walls, and then George F. Walker would just
Win by default.
stab us all. And then he would stab us long after we were dead.
That seems pretty accurate. And in case you're wondering, Brendan said you.
Really?
Yes.
Well, okay, the funny thing is, like, I'm a little female person, but I think I've been realizing recently that I actually have a fairly dirty mind, and also I have some violence in me.
Is that something you can expect to come out into your works upcoming?
Yeah, I think a lot of my upcoming work is I'm getting... there's a sex scene in this play that's being workshopped in January, where when we read it at Banff for the first time with an audience, and I mean, my God, there's no audience more intimidating than the Banff Colony audience, because it's all of the writers come, and so it's Carol Frechette and Jean Murel, and and they're all sitting behind you, and there's like 20 writers that you respect and admire sitting behind you, and I actually realized as they were reading this that I wasn't sure I wanted anyone to know that I could write the sex scene that I'd written. I was like, oh my God, my colleagues now know that I can write that sex scene. Like, wow, that's major.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.